Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's CAH Masterclass. It's our last for the month in celebration of CAH Awareness Month. We will have a short video with Louise Fleming, who is also on our webinar today. And we will have a Q&A at the end. So please use the Q&A icon at the bottom. Don't forget to put in your questions. You can put in your questions ahead, and I will go ahead and read them, and Louise will go ahead and answer a few questions at the end of the video. Louise, did you want to say anything before we start?
No, I'm glad that everyone's here, and I look forward to hearing your questions. Thanks.
Okay. All right.
So today we're going to talk about the transition to college for adolescents with congenital adrenal hyperplasia, or CAH. My name is Louise Fleming. I'm a registered nurse. I've been in practice for over 20 years, and I have done research on the intersection of family life and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So when an adolescent goes off to college and they have CAH, the first thing to think about is the importance of having a local either pediatric endocrinologist or endocrinologist that is close to campus if the college is far from home. This is important because if an emergency were to arise and the child or adolescent would need to go to a local hospital, it is important to have some established relationship with an endocrinology practice there. So that would be one of the things that needs to be considered when choosing the right college or university. Every university of a certain size has some sort of campus health services. And the campus health services can have a variety of healthcare that they'll provide themselves. Usually it would not be specialty care, but they may be able to help you find a local endocrinologist. And they definitely need to be aware of the student with CAH. They need to understand that there is an individual on campus that has this condition. They need to understand how to respond in an emergency or adrenal crisis event. And it will be the student and not the parent that needs to initiate that contact. It's also really important that campus health services can help the family and the student better understand how hospital services and EMS services work in the area. It can be concerning if the university is hours away from the nearest hospital. So that may be something that the family needs to consider with the student when they're considering college areas. But not every college certainly has an academic medical center on site. So, it's just important to better understand the relationship between that university and local healthcare. Often the student's dose of glucocorticoids will change to a longer acting at this point. So some children will have been on hydrocortisone for years and then transition into dexamethasone or prednisone at this stage, particularly if the individual is no longer growing linearly. So it would be important and behoove most families to have that change, if it's going to occur around that time, to happen maybe 2 or 3 months prior to them going away to college. Because if there are any issues, you might want to have the child at home in their familiar environment with an endocrinologist that they've known for years to do the subsequent lab work and to sort of look and judge how they're feeling. So if that is being discussed, it would be probably ideal to have that switch occur a couple months prior to the student entering college. Most college campuses in the United States will have some sort of accessibility or disability services center. So sometimes they're called ARS, which is the preferred term now. And they are wonderful resources for children with any kind of health care need, as well as any kind of emotional or psychosocial issue. So they are well equipped to deal with students that have a variety of conditions, including CAH, although CAH is rare and they may not be as familiar with it as they would be, for example, a diabetic child. So you would research the services that they offer on the website, and they're usually attached to the university's website. What would happen is that a letter from a healthcare provider at the time of admittance is forwarded to Accessibility Resource Services. When a child is applying for colleges, they do not have to disclose that they have CAH. It's not necessary. They are welcome to disclose that maybe as part of their college essay or in any other capacity, but it is not a requirement. And once the child is admitted, that is often the time where they will start working with the ARS to make sure that they're aware that they may have some special healthcare needs. So the letter from the provider should detail the current and situational impact that CAH has on the student, as well as what their daily medications are. Some schools will have a special admittance in based on the need for accessibility resources, but this is not common. So once the child has disclosed, and it really needs to be the student, not the parent. Once the adolescent or child has disclosed this to ARS, ARS will alert faculty once they matriculate into their program. But faculty will not get the diagnosis. They will only get the needed accommodations. And that's really important. So it goes both ways, right? So some parents and families and even students would prefer that the faculty know exactly what the condition is that the child or the student has, whereas some may not want the faculty to know. So rest assured, the faculty will not know the diagnoses. I teach at, actually I'm the associate dean of an undergraduate nursing program in a public university in the Southeast. And I'm very familiar with what these accommodations look like in general. And so as a nurse, sometimes I can look at the accommodations and make a suspicion, oh, I think the student has diabetes, but nowhere in the accommodations is the actual diagnosis disclosed. So that's important to know. However, students may choose to disclose to faculty that they have CAH. And I would encourage, if a relationship is there, to do that, just because sometimes that can help faculty have a better understanding of the need for the accommodations. But it is absolutely up to the student whether they want to make that public to the faculty or private. They are not, faculty are not, should not be under any expectation in college to learn how to give the injection of Solu-Cortef or hydrocortisone. They are not required to then, learn about the condition in any way. But what students share with faculty should be done in a really professional way. So this would be something you would go to for office hours. This would be something that you would go to in a private conversation, certainly not sort of towards the end of class. You just walk up and say this to a faculty member because that's usually a busy time. So it should be an appointment that the student makes if they feel that they are open to to disclosing, and take it from there. Most faculty members only want the best for the student. And so they're just willing to listen and sort of ask, what is it that is needed of me and how can I best support you? This is a difficult time for some families to transition from the responsibility of taking medications and managing provider appointments and disclosing CAH. And the transition goes from the parent to the student or adolescent or child. I keep using those terms interchangeably, so I'm sorry about that. I'm going to try to stick with adolescent. So that in and of itself can be very difficult for families making that transition. So the recommendation would be that you start making the transition prior to when they actually leave for college. So certainly in their last year of high school, more and more responsibility should be placed on the adolescent to take their own medication. To maybe they have a weekly setup where each day you put in the medications for the morning and the afternoon, or depending on the medication and the dosage and the schedule. That should start transitioning at that point to the student, because you want to be able to see how well they're doing prior to them going off to college. The 504 plan that the student may have had in K-12 will not transfer to college. You cannot submit that, and the colleges really don't take into a lot of consideration whether they've had a 504 plan or not. They're going with, this is an adult and what is their provider recommending. So it is the student's responsibility to maintain open communication and needs with ARS and the instructor, not the parents. So I spoke to several ARS coordinators and directors as part of this PowerPoint presentation. The quote that stuck was, "Parents who don't involve the student will do them a huge disservice." It really is the student's time to advocate for themselves. It's part of the transition to adulthood and managing a condition that they're going to be managing for the rest of their lives. And so anything that parents can do to get that adolescent ready to do that the year before is really important. The student must be able to clearly articulate their individual needs and have a solid understanding of CAH. So questions like, well, why would you need this injection? Or how does CAH affect your daily life? Or are there any restrictions associated with your CAH? Or questions that the student and the student alone should be able to answer when asked in that initial ARS appointment. And if they can't, then that's something that needs to be worked on prior to them going to college. Students should carry their hydrocortisone, which is also called Solucortef, injection with them with the pharmacy label clearly on it at all times, likely in their backpack. So who can administer that? There is, of course, the Good Samaritan law, but the healthcare providers can typically administer that, a campus health type situation. Rules can vary from EMS providers. So that's something that you also would want to look at and talk to campus health about. So calling 911 in one state may look different than calling 911 in another state regarding the ability to actually give the injection of hydrocortisone. And most ambulances in the United States do not carry Solucortef or hydrocortisone on board. So that's why it's really important that the Solucortef should be labeled from a pharmacy stating, and it should be current and it should not be expired, and it should be with the student at all times. Students should wear a medical tag identifying them as adrenal insufficient. So that can be a wrist, a bracelet type thing, or a necklace. Those are the most common places that EMS providers or emergency responders would look. And typically it should identify them simply as adrenal insufficient. CAH is rare, and adrenal insufficient is a bit broader. It incorporates people that are adrenal insufficient due to Addison's disease or glucocorticoid dependence. They've been on glucocorticoids for a long time. So adrenal insufficient is probably the best term. Students should feel able to disclose to their friends and to their associates and potentially some faculty that they have CAH and how to respond if they become ill. That really is very important. And that can be challenging in a new environment for anyone, particularly an adolescent leaving home for the first time. So that's something to really consider, and maybe role play a bit before they go to college and talk about how are you going to do that and when are you going to do that. They should train a friend or two on how to give the injection, and they should know how to give the injection themselves. There certainly are situations where they may have to give themselves an injection, but there are also situations where they may be too ill that they would be unable to. So it is important that maybe a roommate, maybe a close friend that they're with a good bit, that they're aware of how to give the injection. Drinking alcohol for any student in a college campus is a challenge, and controlling and drinking in moderation after the age of 21 in the United States is something that is critical to safety. It's even more critical to the safety of individuals with CAH, because as most of you know, if you become intoxicated, that can create a GI upset situation where vomiting will occur. And the risk of being dehydrated from vomiting, whether it's from a GI issue, whether it's from drinking too much alcohol, remains the same for an individual with CAH. So drinking alcohol responsibly is critical. And that's another reason why friends in their social context really need to be aware that they have CAH and what that means to have CAH and what the risks are with drinking alcohol. Sometimes physiological stress can be the result of psychosocial stress over time. So when you think about exam week, just having exams and some anxiety associated with exams is not enough to necessitate a stress dose, which would be a double or triple example dose of hydrocortisone. However, if you're really anxious about exams and maybe you struggle with exam anxiety, and because of that, you're not sleeping for a week at a time and you're not eating well and you're getting really fatigued, that can turn into a physiological problem. Maybe you're having repeated diarrhea from anxiety. And you may need to stress dose, and potentially even the adolescent may need an injection. So those are concerns that need to be talked about first. So just because you're having anxiety for one day over a test tomorrow, no, that is certainly not appropriate to stress dose for that. But prolonged psychological stress that is leading to some physiological decline may necessitate stress dosing. And that's another reason to have a local provider, especially if the college is far away, to sort of talk through with either the nurse or the provider on the phone how you're feeling and what the symptoms are. That also can be done through campus health, depending on the expertise of the providers there. It is, CAH is a rare condition, so that's why it is critical to have some input from a local endocrinologist. So what are some of the accommodations for students with CAH in the college environment? So one is potential housing needs, such as buildings with central heat and air, depending on the climate. So if you live in a relatively warm climate and you're going there in August and there's no central air, the student may become overheated and not tolerate heat well. Some individuals with CAH do have that problem with repeated heat. So that's something to consider. Absence consideration is often an accommodation. And what that means is that the student still needs to attend class. They're not going to waive the attendance policies, but sometimes in the college environment, faculty will consider participation grade as part of their grade in the class. And we all know that with CAH, if a student is feeling ill or has a mild fever or isn't feeling themselves, it can be very difficult for them to go to class, or potentially more than a child that's not affected by CAH or adolescent that's not affected by CAH. And so the adolescent should know their body and know that if they're feeling ill with the common viral upper respiratory situation, they may not be able to make it to class. And it would be difficult to lose points on their final grade based on the fact that they have this health condition that makes it more challenging for them to sort of rally and continue on with their day. Of course, any adolescent should not be going to class sick and infecting others. But for CAH individuals, it really may necessitate staying in bed for a day, and it may not for those without CAH. So that's something that should be listed as an accommodation. And it will usually say something like, attending class during illness has a higher potential to exacerbate the illness. So to be cognizant when grading if the student has repeated absences. The other thing is having access to food and drink during class. Depending on the student's major and coursework, it's possible that some classes are 3 hours long. And although they will get breaks, sometimes that can be challenging for the CAH child to adolescent to not eat for that long. And certainly they should not be restricted from having water, but that can also allow for increased restroom breaks. So having access to food and drink is another accommodation that many individuals with CAH will have on their accommodation plan in the university setting. Finally, a stop clock on tests to allow for restroom use, because they may need to drink more, may need to have a snack, and they may have timed tests. It really would not be appropriate to not allow them to use the restroom. But if they do have to use the restroom, it's also not appropriate to not allow additional time, particularly if the time test is an hour or less, because the restroom could be far from the class. It could take up to 10 minutes, and that can have an impact on grades and academic success. So that's another accommodation. So the ones that you usually see are addressing more frequent absences, having access to food and drink during class, and having a stop clock. In the university setting, most folks don't really look too much into what's in a student's backpack with regards to having an injection in there. So I would not say that usually needs to be spelled out, but there could be certain instances, depending perhaps on the major, where that does need to be spelled out. Also, a lot of universities will require some sort of life fitness type of a course as a requirement for all undergraduate students. And if that's the case and you live in a hot climate, they may need to have their injection with them at all times. So that would be something that would need to be listed as accommodation. And those kinds of conversations are what the student needs to be having with ARS, and they will help them come up with the accommodations. But if you're trying to get that original letter, those are the kinds of things from the provider. Those are the kinds of accommodations that need to be spelled out. So thank you very much. I hope this has been helpful as the consideration from transitioning from an at-home adolescent to an adolescent who's becoming a college-age student and has CAH, and what some of those accommodations are needed. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, that was a great presentation. Thank you, Louise. So
Sure.
at this moment, we're gonna go ahead. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and use the Q&A icon again at the bottom of your screen. So anyone who has any questions, Louise is here to answer them for you. Okay, it looks like we have one that wants to actually ask you a question. Hold on.
Sure.
Hi.
Is that me? Can
Yes.
you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Louise. First of all, thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate you. So my name is Diane Iman, and I met you about,
Yes, I know you, Diane.
yes, and I love you, and you have saved my children's lives.
Oh,
So
you're sweet.
thank you.
Oh,
Really.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
I want to name, I wish I could have more kids and name them after you. I love you that much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And our boys are doing so great.
I'm
so great.
glad. That's
Um,
wonderful.
Yes, thank you. I do have a couple of questions. I joined a minute or 5 late.
Sure.
So the ARS, I'm sorry, I didn't catch what that
Yeah.
was called, what that
So
is.
ARS is Accessibility Resource Services, and that is the new sort of term in most colleges and universities for disability resources. The word disability has been replaced by accessibilities, and pretty much every accessibility, and pretty much every university will have some sort of service like that. Even if they're small, they will have that. And those are for any individual that has any sort of issue. So it could range from a student that maybe has severe test anxiety to a student that maybe is in a wheelchair and is a paraplegic. So it really does cover the gamut. It's not just physical health conditions, it's also mental health. And that initial conversation with, whether they call it ARS or disability services or whatever the university calls it, is actually pivotal to the beginning of the student's relationship in college and how their CAH will be viewed by not only their associates and their faculty perhaps, but by themselves. And that's really important that students take ownership of that. So that's what that is. And every college will have something like that. And that's where the conversation begins.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And any parent that is worried about, having their kids learn to do the shot or tell their friends, a shout out. It is such a great thing to teach your kids and have the kids know how to do it, because we have had to rely on our kids' friends, and it has been a great blessing. So
Yes.
Thank you. This was awesome. I appreciate it.
Great. I see another question in the chat too. And thanks, Diane. It's so great to hear from you again about how to know if CAH is affecting test taking. So typically, just having CAH alone should not affect the student's ability to be successful academically. Most students with CAH don't have any sort of cognitive relationship or struggle because of their CAH. But I will say that sometimes anxiety and not getting enough, taking care of yourself well before big exams can have some physical effects. So I think the child who is now actually going to be an adolescent and almost a young adult really needs to be able to identify that themselves. And that's something I think that you need to talk to the child about when they are in high school. So one of the things I tried to stress in the presentation, but it's really, really important, and what I see a lot in children with a variety of health conditions in my current role is when there's hasn't been those conversations prior to them coming to college, there are sometimes problems. So it's really important that the child identifies probably around the age 15, 16, when they're in high school, how are they functioning with their CAH? So, if they don't eat a good breakfast, it's possible that maybe their blood sugar drops. And maybe if they have a test around that time of the day, they're not going to be as successful academically. And so the time to ask that and assess that in your child is really before they go to college. So those would be the kinds of questions I would be looking for. Like, at what time of the day does the child feel really tired every day at 3:30? If so, perhaps they need some hydrocortisone then, and that's something I would talk to your provider about. So look for patterns before they go to college that may affect them academically and their ability to take tests at a certain time and that sort of thing. One thing that I would also really stress is that by the time many children with CAH and other conditions enter college, they often don't want to disclose that they have any condition and don't feel it's necessary to go to ARS and to seek that out. And I would just encourage all of you that have children with CAH to try really hard to make the child or the adolescent understand the importance of, even if they don't use these accommodations, have them in the books, because you never know when you may need them. And gosh, did I see that this last year with COVID, the amount of absences that universities dealt with for a variety of reasons, but particularly COVID was really serious. So a child with CAH, a lot of freshmen in college get mono, for example. That could lead to double the number of absences potentially that a student without CAH would have. And if they didn't have that in the books, that they have a condition and that it may affect their performance in any way, it's really harder to do that after the fact, because you do have to have the note first. And if your child's really sick at that time, it makes the process so much harder. So even if they don't use a single accommodation, even if they never go to the restroom, even if they never have to eat the food they bring to class, even if they're not absent that much, it's still better to go ahead and seek the accommodation at the beginning. And it's not something that they have to do every year. So usually, unless they need additional accommodations, doing it one time will last their whole time that they're in college. So that their tenure there will be covered with that one ARS designation.
Okay, awesome. I have another one here in the Q&A. Says, is it uncommon to have the accommodation for extra time on tests?
No.
Our daughter has, on rare occasion, especially if she has forgotten to eat or has gotten a little dehydrated, felt fuzzy or not as sharp. Her current high school trusts her to know when she needs to snack or drink to compensate, but also has allowed her in these cases extra time on the test or quiz, if needed, since it can take a little bit for the snack or drink to kick in. So they're just curious on your thoughts.
Yes, I think that that's perfectly reasonable. I will say that most of the students that I work with, so at any time I have 300 students that I'm working with, probably 10%, 5 to 10% have some sort of accommodations. Many of the accommodations are time plus 50%. Typically, those accommodations are based on some sort of learning need, whether that's maybe ADD or ADHD or some sort of learning need, but not all of the time. So I have seen it both ways. Particularly, I have not worked with the child with CAH in my job, but what I have seen is many of the children that have diabetes that I've worked with will say that the clock can be stopped, but I've also seen the student may need 10% more time. I've seen 25% more time, and it will say based on their need to take a break due to their health condition. So that is not uncommon. And I would ask for that, however, from the provider note. So that's another important point, is that if that's been your child's experience in high school, I would go ahead and talk to your provider so that that's outlined in the note, because there shouldn't be any issue with getting that in place.
Okay. I don't see any more in the Q&A. Check the chat. Is there anyone else that has a question? You can raise your hands. You can, again, use the Q&A, or you can type something in the, okay, chat. I see something in the chat. Says, I want to make my 7-year-old responsible to just come and ask me for medication. How can I help her?
So 7 is some of the tools that we would tell people to do with their child involve watches and alarms. And 7 might be a little young for like a watch that has an alarm. I'm not sure. You'll have to gauge, or phone, a smartphone. It depends on how your family views that with children, but setting alarms are really good as a first try, so that when the time comes, they can come to you and say, my alarm just went off, it's time for my medication. That's one way. Another way is if you give the medication every day at the same time. So let's say you give it to them when they come home from school. You could say to, I don't know if it's your son or your daughter, but your child, when they come, you could say, okay, every time you walk in the house after school, I need you to ask me for your medication, and start getting them in the habit of doing that. So I would say reminders that are sort of tangible, like phone, that actually make a noise, that send a reminder. And then also trying to give medication at the same time. So if it's with breakfast every morning, maybe give them breakfast and don't give them the medication. And then at the end of breakfast, just say, you didn't ask me for your medication. You take that with breakfast right before we go to school every day. So trying to set those times of just consistency really will help. But at some point, particularly if the child's medication needs to be cut or divided, they really need to start doing that themselves, probably in the middle school timeframe, and really looking at how to do that and that sort of thing, because the more you can start transitioning with oversight, the better they'll do when they go off to college.
Awesome. Anything else? Again, we still have a few more minutes. Any other questions? I don't know, Louise, if you have anything off the top of your head that you might want to add or recommend.
The only thing I would just want to add again, I don't know a good book, but I think that if you find one, let us know. That would be great. The only thing I would really recommend is that I have seen firsthand when students are not able to clearly articulate their needs and their accommodations, and when they have been dependent on their parents to do that. I will say that I know at UNC, our ARS really won't speak to the parents. We have what's called FERPA. It's kind of like what you guys think of HIPAA in the medical world. We have that for students in college. It's called FERPA. And if your child is 18, which most college freshmen are, we actually are not allowed to talk to their parents without the child's permission. So if you're the parent that's been managing that and not been letting go of that and I know it's hard. I have a 7-year-old myself with CAH, so I understand the challenge there. But I can guarantee you that when they go to college, it will be us talking to your child. It will not be us talking to you. And so if they're not equipped to be able to handle questions about their condition, if they can't talk about it, if they haven't practiced doing that, if they can't advocate for themselves, with ARS and with their faculty, it will be a harder road. So anything you can do to encourage that independence and do it gradually, I think makes everything more comfortable for both you and for your child and for their college environment.
That's awesome. That's good to know. Louise, I think we're all done.
Great.
Here. Yeah, I don't have any more questions or anything. All right, thank you everyone again for attending our last CAH Masterclass for the month. Don't forget, we have these previous ones available online. Thank you, Louise, again for your presentation and for being on and answering some questions. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.